welcome to another edition of the dOrg Hot Seat. Today we are here with Etherlink, which is a fast, fair, and nearly free layer 2. All right, we are here with Nico and Ypsono. Guys, can you introduce yourselves with a couple of sentences each?
Sounds good. So I joined the Tezos ecosystem and an R&D hub in London called Trilitech about a year and something ago now. I'm running the DeFi ecosystem for Tezos at large and that new blockchain we're here to discuss called Etherlink. And I'm also running Etherlink itself, the chain, and trying to make sure that it's spec'd out properly for any use cases that are a bit bleeding edge and more demanding, like some of the DeFi use cases. And Ypsono right here joined us more than 6 months ago now. It's been a while, and I'll let him introduce himself. He does marketing for us in Asia.
Yeah, hi, Ypsono here. I handle Etherlink's partnership marketing, and anything ecosystem related support I handle as well. I think mostly here will be for Nico to answer for today, given how technical it is. But I appreciate being here, and thank you, Anita, for setting this up.
Amazing, cool. All right, let's get straight into it. I really like your sort of motto: fast, fair, and nearly free. So can you elaborate in each of these 3 words: fast, fair, and nearly free?
Yep. To keep it relatively quick, so the fast relates to the block time. Essentially, because we're on L2, which it's an optimistic rollup actually, but the model allows for very quick pre-confirmations, really, soft finality confirmations. We have that block time of 500 milliseconds, which will even come down. If you look at Arbitrum, they're at 250, and that's definitely possible given the speed of fiber connectivity globally. So that's something that is appreciated by the users. They've gotten used to at this point with Solana, with Arbitrum One, with a few others, and so that's something that I believe anything below 1 second is okay, to be honest. In the customer surveys we've sort of run and things, but it's definitely faster than what Tezos used to be, and what a lot of blockchains are still offering, with some of the OP stack chains still being at 2 seconds or a little more. Same for Avalanche and things like that. So it's not a game changer, but it's definitely appreciable, at least for me, when I click on the UI and straight away I get a visual cue to confirm that my transaction has been taken in. So that's the fast sort of aspect. Very standard. The fair aspect is a bit more unique, I would say. So the fair aspect is about I don't know if you were part of the Avalanche community when it was really booming in 2021, but there was this whole idea. There were a bunch of sub-communities in there, and one of them was Frog Nation and stuff like that. Didn't end well, by the way. But at that time, there was this real a layer of hope.
With Sifu.
Yeah, that's right. There was this whole layer of hope and stuff where people kind of thought that you were part of that ecosystem and they kind of had your back. The little guy has a shot, everyone is treated the same, things like that. And actually, so in their case, it was mainly about the opportunities being shared sort of equally, which we're trying to encourage in our own ecosystem. It's permissionless and everyone can do whatever. But for the stuff that we're trying to push, we're really trying for those things that are a bit less adversarial and a little more spreading value around. But the main thing that it prefers to is things related to MEV. And related to how you're treated as someone who interacts with the chain, regardless of how you interact with it. Are you interacting with it with a MetaMask or Rabby wallet or something like that? Are you interacting with code? Are you trying to collocate with a sequencer? Whatever it is, how are you going to be treated, and how much money is going to be made on you, essentially, with that thing? And we've tried to engineer the ecosystem in a way that there would be as little of those negative externalities as possible. One example is there is a contract between the foundation and the sequencer. And that contract stipulates in a very clear clause that they cannot extract MEV from their position as processing those orders. Things related to how the nodes are like treating it as well. We have an external node provider called Ziv, for example, and same thing. They're not extracting MEV on you. You can use Ziv as a node, and they're not gonna straight away try to front run you or anything like that, which happens in many other ecosystems. And the last bit is about like a little more of a built-in element to it, where we're planning on doing what Osmosis has done in Cosmos and some of the others with an encrypted mempool, where essentially even if you wanted to front run or to do MEV, not all MEVs, it doesn't catch all MEVs, but a lot of them, and the most toxic ones, you couldn't, because you don't know what's in the transaction until the thing is like decrypted. So that's what we mean by fair, and we can elaborate on this if you guys have questions as well. And then the nearly free simply refers to the fact that it's less of a USP right now than it was pre-blobs, pre-EIP4844 and so on. However, at this point, the cost on a normal sort of average transaction, think of a transfer from or something on an ERC20 is about 1/10 of the cent, so 0.0001. And that to me is there's no scientific definition for nearly free, but essentially, that 0 to 1 thing that Peter Thiel talks about and things like that. I think we're getting close to that, where we're sufficiently cheap that a lot of use cases can just be in there. You need to do 1,000 transactions to pay $1. That's good enough to start doing stuff where not all of the transactions need to be super impactful in a minimum amount sort of money and impact and things like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. That gives us sort of the roadmap to go through the different parts. That's super interesting. You mentioned it is a rollup. It is an optimistic rollup. And you mentioned also pre-confirmations, and you mentioned also a sequencer. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sequencing and the pre-confirmation stack that gets you to this 500 milliseconds confirmation time?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, we did look at what was already out there. That's the benefit of not being first to market is that you have hindsight. And a lot of people, really, really good teams, have worked on these. And in particular, for me, I really like the Arbitrum team and what they've done with their own tech stack. I think I also like Optimism and some of the others, obviously, but starting by making sure that the refutation game, the chain is actually safe, because you can, if there's a problem with the state, actually submit a proof that will tell you that there's been a problem. It was the right way to go. So we've looked a lot into what they've done, what some of the newer works that have been done, some in coordination with the Ethereum Foundation and so on, have looked like. There's a lot of movement towards ZK and validity rollups these days, but there's still quite a bit being done on optimistic rollups. And so essentially what the Etherlink setup looks like in relation to Tezos is quite similar for all intents and purposes to what you would have more or less as a user with Arbitrum 1 relative to Ethereum. There are a few key differentiators that I think are interesting, and there's pros and cons to that approach, right? So the first thing is, you have an optimistic rollup, which is actually a kernel within the code of the L1 itself, Tezos. So we settle to Tezos, of course, but we also use it for data availability. What this means is that it's an enshrined rollup. And so you're treated as a first-class citizen by the L1 itself, which means that there's some stuff you, for example, would be able to do quite easily if you were a smart contract at the app layer, like Arbitrum is, and OP mainnet and Base, that you cannot do. On the other hand, it does mean that you're a lot more aligned with that ecosystem by sort of definition. In order to upgrade Etherlink, you do need a vote by governance, which is what Tezos is well known for historically, where we have on-chain governance. And so that thing is very transparent. There is no you need to have a hash that is submitted, and then the different hashes that have been submitted for an upgrade are being voted on, and the ones that get selected automatically gets rolled into the code base. So there's no something that can happen. There is no validity proofs or refutation games being deactivated, not throwing anything at anyone here, but that cannot happen, and everything will be on chain systematically. Now, there is some downsides to this because it's less flexible, and in order to get an upgrade in there, you need consensus, which means that you're more of in an L1 type of setup, which typically has been an advantage of those layer 2s to be able to upgrade and go a little faster. So that's something where every time we upgrade, we have to think quite long term, because every time you want to change this, it's a 2-week conversation with is everyone okay with this? Who's going to vote for it? Because if you put it up and it doesn't get voted, it's always a waste of time and something where the resources of the ecosystem at large haven't been used in their best way. And so, that's the basic setup. You have a blockchain that has one sequencer, so single node sequencer. However, that sequencer is decentralized. And what we mean by decentralized sequencer, we don't mean that it's distributed. It's actually single node. However, it can be changed by governance in the exact same way that the code in the kernel, the code of Etherlink, can be changed. I don't know.
All right, so it's not the sequencer. It's not decentralized in the traditional form of, but it is subject to vote. It is almost like a delegated sequencer that receives the voting, the Tezos ecosystem decides to put their trust in that one, and if this one fails to do their job properly, it can be given to somebody else.
That's right.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, perfect. All right, that makes a lot of sense. So, what? It is not clear to me, but I'm sure there's a big one. What are the advantages of being an enshrined rollup? What exactly happens at the layer 1 level that benefits Etherlink?
Yeah, one positive thing that comes from it, but is not a direct benefit of it, is that there is complete alignment between the guys doing the rollup and the guys doing the L1. Of course, because they're the same core entities working on it. What it means is that a lot of the stuff at the L1 level will be changed, will be developed in a way that benefits that exact rollup.
Right. So these increase of blobs debate that happens in Ethereum right now. That's been, some people say yes, some people say no. There's a complete alignment here, and they both layer 1 and rollup can move in the same direction.
Yeah. To be fair, you do have that in Ethereum. It takes a lot longer. But for example, right now, if you talk to Linea, to Scroll, to ZK-Sync, whatever, they're going to tell you that the Ethereum roadmap is very much driven in favor of the optimistic rollups. Sure. I think that's going to be less and less the case, to be honest, but they're telling you that. What it means is that they can't be all things to all people, and there's a limited amount of resources that they can spend on whatever. So if you go to this research or whatever, you're going to see more threads on optimistic rollups still at the end of 2024 than on validity. And that's a choice that the ecosystem has made. So if you're a validity rollup, you're going to have to wait your time a little bit. You can still do stuff, but some of the major changes at the N1 level, it's going to get a bit delayed, and you're going to have to do without for a little while. In that scenario, so I was trying to skip a step, but I'll just give that for the full explain. You do have the Tezos L1. The Tezos L1 has a framework called the Smart Rollup Tech Stack. That Smart Rollup Tech Stack is designed with optimistic rollups in mind, and you can do an optimistic rollup in that tech stack very easily with some base components in common. And then you can specify your own VM and things like that, for example. but for the way it interacts with the L1, that is standardized by this smart rollup tech stack. Of course, if tomorrow you want to do your own rollup as a smart contract on top of Tezos, nothing stops you from it. But you have to do everything yourself, right? If you come and you use that smart rollup tech stack, you have something that is a bit like, of a less convenient, less easy, but more flexible way of doing like Polygon CDK or Arbitrum Orbit or something like that. But it is more flexible. There's more things you can change in that tech stack than what you would be able to change if you use the OP stack and you're trying to shift away the building blocks, or if you're using Arbitrum Orbit and so on. And so Ethereum Etherlink, happens to be the first rollup in that tech stack, but there's others in development. And for things that are quite unique for some of our corporate partners, for example, there can be some that come out that do a specific thing that has more privacy focus, has more of a governance that departs from what we've done for Etherlink, for example. And things like that. That's definitely possible as well. And I think a lot of those tech stacks are out there for like a variety of like, things on the gradient, whether you want something like really off the shelf, but strictly for you, or you want something that's quite unique because you have a use case that's dependent on a specific feature, or things like that.
Yeah, it seems that this is kind of like the direction that all layer 2s are taking, to have like some sort of a tech stack almost to cater to app specific rollups, or use case specific rollups, right? With Arbitrum Orbit or the CDKs or the superchain, which was called the OP stack before. So the Tezos smart rollup technology would fall into this category, right?
With that particular spin on it, which is that Etherlink is meant to be a canonical rollup. And essentially what we're doing, and Ethereum is going that way as well, to be fair, but what we're doing is the Tezos L1 is for staking operations, anything like purely L1 related. But then the activity going forward is very likely to be on those L2s that are faster, more user-friendly, and the block time is not 12 seconds, and things like that. And having that concentrated, avoiding some of the pitfalls of fragmentation that we've seen in some of the other ecosystems and have given Solana a very big upside since the nadirs of 2022, is really something that is key to how we're building that ecosystem. On finding the liquidity in one place, not having like two versions of like various stable coins, things like that. That's something we're really taking to heart as we're building that ecosystem.
Yeah. Speaking about ecosystem, let's explore a little bit this fusion between EVM and Tezos. Is the objective for this fusion to bring EVM developers or part of the DeFi ecosystem into the Tezos ecosystem? What was the main goal of doing it EVM compatible?
Yeah, on this there's a plurality of views. We are converging towards like the views that I'm going to say here, but this is more my view. And even if I'm wrong, this is not a major deal. So you'll see what I mean by that. What I think personally is that EVM, and particularly Solidity, is the JavaScript of Web3. I think you're right. It's is it the best language? Was it designed in the best way? Whatever. Is not that relevant. It's a tech stack that's used by a ton of people, that has a lot of battle-tested code on it, and that people are quite familiar with at this point. So what it means in particular is that the tools designed for the EVM are first class. If you look at stuff like Alchemy, like ThirdWeb, like any of the stuff that are meant to help developers do some stuff, even if you compare right now the Rust-based ecosystem on Solana and the stuff on EVM, it's night and day. It's 10 times easier to do stuff on EVM that just are out there, are super usable. Anything around the account abstraction tech stack is becoming quite usable as well and making a lot of progress lately and things like that. So piggybacking on this and making sure that you're having a technology that people know, like, and has legs, essentially, with like very large billion-dollar companies coding on it to improve the user experience for builders, and things like that was super important. And as the first roll-up of that smart roll-up tech stack, it just made sense. A lot of other ecosystems have done that. Near back in the day with Aurora, more recently you even had like IOTA do Shimmer. Every single ecosystem that had another tech stack to begin with for smart contracts. Most of them have tried to have an EVM tech stack with mixed success, to be fair. But that is something that is absolutely worth trying, and more than trying, actually putting our eggs into and trying to put a really strong campaign behind this to get more builders, more existing companies trying to interact with Web3 or add some Web3 components to what their workflows are day to day in the financial sector in particular. They are much more keen to use an EVM type tech stack, especially with Solidity, because it's reusable. And something that they might already have some familiarity with in their developer teams internally. So that was a very big part of this. And the other part is the account abstraction tech stack and anything going from MetaMask, the newer ones that I really like called Rabi Wallet by the dBank team, and some of the others are really some things that are just hard to replicate as well. Having a chain added to dBank for tracking on various DeFi things that you're doing is very simple. You need a big account that sponsors that thing, and they'll see how much activity there is on it, and it's gonna get done. Same for Dex Screener and a bunch of other things. If you're not EVM compatible, that's a lot harder. And that's a discussion that requires some nuances, and you might have to do it yourself, which is never a good idea, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely worth a try going into the EVM ecosystem. We've got so as we said, this is the dOrg hot seat. So it's time to invite Pilex from the dOrg team to ask a question too.
Hey there, Nico. Great talk. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I'm actually really interested because this has been on my mind a lot recently, right? And it is essentially has to do with censorship resistance and how you want to approach it, given that it's a single sequencer approach to the rollup itself, right? Yep. So yeah, I'm really interested in what your thoughts are, what the community's thoughts are, maybe, right? And really how you intend to approach it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no worries. That's a super interesting debate as well. So first, I'd like to say, even for Arbitrum One, for example, or some of the guys we're building on the shoulders of giants here. You have stuff like forced inclusion, where essentially even if on Arbitrum One the sequencer goes mad, and they would really have to go crazy to do that because the incentives are just not there. But you never know, right? And they try to censor every single transaction in there. You can force include via a delayed inbox. That's our own term. They have a different term, but it's very similar. From the L1, and your transaction will be included. Yeah, it's slower. There is a delay of, I believe, 10 minutes in their case, but to be checked. But at the end of the day, your transaction is going to make it through. And most likely, if you've been censored before, that transaction is to exit that ecosystem and go back to the L1, right? So that there is censorship resistance even in those tech stacks. What we have that I think goes above and beyond, hopefully, what has been done before by those ecosystems is that you can change very easily the sequencer dealing with those transactions. So let's say tomorrow, the sequencer currently is called middle.dev. It's a team in Czech Republic. Those guys, let's say tomorrow they go crazy, and you're able to show, and that's it doesn't really take a genius to do that those transactions have been censored. You have on the Etherlink tech stack sequencer observers. You have people who can run a full node on Etherlink and so on and so forth. You can even have two versions of the full node, low latency, where you essentially get the word from the sequencer every time and hope that they apply the state transition function properly, or a high latency node that actually listens to the processed L2 blocks on the L1. Sorry, that's super technical, but basically when your listeners listen again, they can digest that a little bit, and that's actually the proper process that is followed not only by the Tezos rollups with Etherlink, but also Arbitrum 1, except that on Etherlink, that process is very short because we have single slot finality on RL1, which helps a little bit there. If you wanted, you see that the sequencer is censoring. The ecosystem will be very quick to pick up on this. And then you can trigger a vote, and you can actually replace them by another sequencer. So it's not perfect. It's not the guarantee of censorship resistance of the Tezos L1 exactly, but it's pretty damn close, because like the number of stuff that they can do is quite limited on the short time frames that we're talking about. Now, I'll be honest, there are some stuff, and like Justin Drake and some others in some podcasts recently have been alluding to that, where you can do some nasty things by censoring some Oracle transactions. And for example, if you're using a model of oracles for Oracle price feeds that are push oracles, Chainlink style, Redstone core, classic style, or something like that, that can be quite nasty. It's a little less nasty, or at least we haven't found a way just yet, but we will. That's crypto, right? With like Pi type of oracle or something like that. But I'm pretty sure there's something you can do there as well. You can have stuff like that, and that does mean that, like, if at some point we were to see that on Arbitrum, on Etherlink, on whatever, then the oracle providers themselves or the protocols using those oracles would have to code taking that into account for, like, safety nets and things like that. So it's not perfect, but essentially that censorship resistance is a little more than what you would have on an Ethereum rollup at the moment, or like, those rollups in other ecosystems we've seen with OPBNB on BNB chain and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd really just like to comment that I love the fact that you said, I'm sure there's a way to handle it, because I've personally found that, like, that conviction to really hold true a lot of times. So yeah, I wish you nothing but the best of luck. Yeah, I know. You've got some intuition that there is a way to solve it. So yeah, we will solve it. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for answering my question.
No worries.
We've also got Andre on stage for a last question.
Hey there.
Hey.
Thanks for being here, guys. I'm a big fan of Etherlink and working on 2 apps with Tezos Commons on Etherlink. So one is Homebase, which you might have heard of, the DAO platform, which has been on layer 1 for a while, and now we're deploying it on Etherlink as well. The other one is Trustless Business, which is a dispute resolution thing. And I really like the low transaction costs and the speed. Obviously, I have a question about the low transaction costs, though, because a side effect of non-negligible transaction cost is that people are more careful with what they publish on chain. So how do you balance the low fees with the risk of people just spamming the chain?
Yep, that's a good question. And good to hear that, like, you're building on Etherlink, and I'd like to take that opportunity to share my project a tiny bit and to actually, like, encourage a lot more people to reach out to us and to just look at it and look at the projects that we currently have that are about to launch that might enable you to do stuff on top of them. So anyways, now back to your question. Essentially, that anti-spam feature is absolutely needed. We've seen that in the past when the Aurora transactions were free for a little bit early 2022 and things like that. You do need that anti-spam feature. Now, you need it for a variety of ways, but currently the how do you say that in English? The bottleneck of most of those blockchains is actually execution. So basically, it is not data. It's not a variety of things. It's really execution. Execution is the thing that takes the longest and doesn't have enough allocation in time budget on each of the blocks to get to a scalable thing. Monad is doing a lot of stuff on execution for EVMs, and you can see that there's a lot of ways to actually make that a lot better without the SVM, without various VMs that are execution optimized by default and things like that. However, there's still a bottleneck there. So in order to get to a manageable scenario where you don't have too many transactions to execute for not only the sequencer, but any full node who's following along and trying to see what's happening on chain, you need to ensure that we don't have too many transactions at once, like what happened, for example, recently on Arbitrum when layer 0 dropped their token, right? And in that scenario, yes, even on Etherlink, when I'm saying that the transaction fees are low, they are low in most scenarios, right? If right now you try and submit a transaction, if you try to submit a transaction, even when we get to a more sustained realized transactions per second type metric on Etherlink, your transactions are going to be very cheap. However, to prevent an entire clogging of the system, yes, if there are too many transactions being submitted, the transaction fees do go up. Okay, and then there you would get transaction fees, like, even at $1 or something, if there's a lot of people trying to submit at the same time, but in a very large sort of capacity with like 50, 60, 70 transactions per second, that would start to increase. We're doing a lot of testing around this on the testnet at the moment to try and understand what's doable. We're also doing a lot of performance improvements. A large part of the core engineering team is just focused on this. However, the performance improvements have some limitations, and that's not the core of your question anyway, so I'm going to brush on this. But essentially, the very far journey is to look at what Monad has been doing, what Phantom with like the Sonic VMs that they are like pushing right now have been doing, and so on. And that's like something that can bring you orders of magnitude in scale of improvements. Short term, we're doing some small improvements and things around like, the tech stack and how we're dealing with the smart contracts, going from WASM to RISC-V and things like that. But that's the first part of your question. And then the second bit is, I guess you're getting to the point of like, if the chain doesn't charge too much, like what's in it for us, basically? Is there enough money for this to be sustained? Like, was this part of your question, or was it really more the first part about scaling and how you manage the transaction fees? Yeah. Depending on the workload.
No, the question was primarily about how you manage people just trying to spam. So I guess my understanding is that you're using a system similar to what's happening on most chains, where you have some logic whereby if the volume is high, then the fees go automatically high, right? That's cool. So, yeah. And that's been tried and tested.
Well, one thing I can add to this is, typically, you could say, okay, you know what? At some point, people might like try to store some stuff and do a lot of data submissions to the chain, and that could clog the chain and make it a lot harder for validators on the L1 to validate and have to bump their hardware requirements and all that. We do have a solution already for this, but my own feeling is that would be super far in the future, like years. Where like instead of doing the data availability on chain, we do have our own DAO that is directly like managed by the validators of the L1, so very related to the L1, but not the L1 itself. And that's something that we could also put in place very easily because it's tried and tested. We've tested it internally and so on. We didn't decide to straight away plug it in on Etherlink because frankly, on the data availability of the L1, there's so much space.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Andre, you had another question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I know we're coming up on the time here, but I wanted to ask, thank you so much, Nico, by the way, for clearing this up for me. I wanted to ask Ypsono about the angle to promote this. To me, it seems like a chain which is optimized for low transaction fees is also optimized for mass adoption and people using it for regular shopping. Is that part of the angle in trying to promote this? And if not, what is like the unique selling proposition that you're pushing in terms of communication strategy?
I think unique selling proposition. Well, I think for right now, we are trying to focus more on the depth side of things. So whatever apps that are more likely to succeed on the chain, we are pushing for those. So I guess things that I can mention to you are like Sugarverse, which is a Web2 game that has that's using Etherlink as its underlying blockchain. And yeah, with the number of users they're bringing on, which is around 3.5 million, which they've scored on their Web2 games last year, with Etherlink's low transaction costs and high TPS, they should be able to handle their users. And other than that, is like what Nico mentioned, more towards the DeFi side. We have Superland, which is aggregating lending markets across chains and settling on Etherlink. We have Hanji, a cloud that is on testnet at the moment and entering mainnet. And other than that is real world cross-border remittance payments platform called Credeta. So currently, I guess in terms of communications, we are focusing more on what you can use on the chain, less on the technical architecture. Yeah.
How
Cool
about
stuff. Thank you so much.
users? How about users now? Is there so Uzi asks, is there any? So right now, there's a lot of marketing happening as well with points programs and onboarding quests and all of this. Is there anything planned for early users on your side?
Yeah,
And we're going to finish
I
with
can
this.
take that one if you want.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nico.
So yeah, like there's a number of things that we're looking into on that side. There would definitely be that on Etherlink. The thing is that right now, like if you're not doing this, you're essentially not playing. So you do need to do this. A lot of those programs that, let's be honest, haven't worked. The whole goal of those programs is retention. Of course, you want to fairly distribute the token and all that, I get that, but a lot of it is about retention and having something on the chain that is worth doing with or without rewards, right? And for this, you entice people to look into what you've built yourself and what the ecosystem has looked like around it, and to try and come in and like share into the value as token goes up, hopefully, right? However, we want to make sure that when we do this, we do it in a way that is a bit more broad-based than what we've seen in some of those programs in the past. For example, right now, if I take the ones that are out there, Linea is very TVL focused, right? Which has some pros and some cons. And we see a lot of cons because the activity is just not there. So it's a lot harder to bootstrap a whole ecosystem purely around TVL-based incentives. It is CBIL resistant, which is a good thing. However, we believe that there's a more targeted way of doing things. If you look at what Sonic has been doing lately in the last few weeks, I think that's a little more interesting because it's involving a lot more of a unique selling proposition in the way they seem to be looking to release those 140 million in incentives at current FTM token prices, right? So there's stuff that we're looking at on that side. A lot of it is like building, like essentially using those good builders that have come quite early to Etherlink. We're in my accelerator in April in Singapore, called the DeFi Catalyst Accelerator, where some of the ones that are already launched, already live, organic, like organic growth, which is like, something for meme coins, pump.fun style, or like Iguanadex, which is simply a Uniswap V3 fork, or like some of the ones that are like, variable for NFTs and things like that. We want to encourage a lot more of that in an organic way with those programs that could be in the shape of a builders program that could be announced in the next month or so, for example. Things like an Etherlink Apple Farm, which is like, a bit similar to what Turtle.club has been doing to encourage incentivize liquidity on various platforms. It's protocol based, but they also have some partners in chains like Linea, and they give you some share of their tokens once they become a DAO with a token, based on your activity and your points, your total points on the platform until they launch that token. That's quite interesting, a bit unique, and they've done super well, like they're all the rage, a lot of people want to be part of that club and so on. So there's something like that might happen. There is also that willingness for the right partners to deploy quite a bit of liquidity and we can like help with this, help them understand the stack, the stuff in decent size, to have like at least a feature parity thing where you're able to do things in decent size on Etherlink. And you don't have to struggle and do small size here and there. The last bit that I can mention on that side, which is like adjacent to your question, is that we're making everything we can. We're doing everything we can to make it very easy for users to get to Etherlink, get out if they want to with some or all of their money, for a lot of chains to be connected to us, and a lot of centralized exchanges. And that's ongoing. That's something that we'll announce in a little bit. There's 3 of them currently integrating Etherlink, which for an L2 that is quite new and on a tech stack that is a bit novel, is not that easy actually. So that's something I was surprised about, this ability to actually have centralized exchanges support us roughly from the get-go. Like, I know the chain has been live for a little while, but it's a beta stage and so on. And that's something that's quite convenient for me as a user. When I was on Blast during the first season of farming, or when it's super annoying, you're stuck there, you only have some tokens that are being supported by Stargate, which we will be supported with as well. Like we're about to put a proposal on their forum and things like that. So you need to go to that token. So that token is trading at a premium, because everyone is trying to get out through that token to other ecosystems and things like that. It's a lot nicer if the gas token and the stable coins are supported by various centralized exchanges relatively quickly. And so that's something we've been doing as well.
Exciting. Okay, so basically keep it in mind. Soon we're going to see some action, some program, some well-designed program potentially. It's interesting because I completely agree with you that not all of these objectives, a lot of these programs are not managing to fulfill objectives. They're not optimizing for retention. It's just mercenary capital. That's the eternal program, right? So coming up with a good design for this is not it's not easy.
To be fair also to those programs, there's a bit of luck in there as well, because if you have a good app that comes in and is a bit innovative and a bit key, it's also a lot easier, and that you don't control everything, so that could be a bit of luck as well.
100%. So beautiful. Okay. Thank you very much for coming up and explaining us everything that we could squeeze you out in this half an hour about Etherlink. What are the sources of information that users should go to if they want to learn more about Etherlink, or about and where can they find you two guys?
Yeah, so on my side, so that same handle at Nico_ST_29 on Twitter. That's a Twitter account that I created literally for that time at Tezos with Etherlink and so on, to give people information in my own name, etc. The Etherlink handle itself on Twitter, which essentially will funnel you to everything else we have so far, with the Discord server, the Etherlink portal that has made a lot of progress lately and is a lot more easier to navigate. And things like the dogs themselves, and various podcasts where we regularly give some updates and try to answer people's questions and give them some sort of an insight on what's a bit unique and a bit special about Etherlink and its ecosystem in what's coming in the next few months.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Nico. Thank you very much, Ypsono. And we will be following with very deep attention what's coming up for Etherlink. Thank you for coming.